let's get down to business. Give you one more night to get this. We've had a million nights just like this. So let's get down to business. Mama.
Hi, this is Sergio, and welcome back to our video discussion. Last week, we talked about how the world as a whole, countries who talk to each other, solve their problem with, with economics. When they reached to the point that they had war, we had World War One, World War Two for disputing against territories, and they found a way. They found an agreement. They convened. They had a conference. They talked about rules that they could follow, and those were the things that we talked about in the previous discussion. And we also talked about the US dollars being the standard of economics at that time, until it went down to being distributed internationally. So all economies had their own currencies, and their currencies were also recognized. So each country already have their own currency, and it's not only the US dollar that we have to look up to or to base on when we have international exchange and international businesses. In today's discussion, we will talk about investments, imports, and governance to complete the discussion for lesson 2. Before we can talk about what actually happened at that time, let me give you a background of the basic of investments. Now, let us say you would like to invest. So there are 4 of you, 4 friends who would like to invest, and each of you have 250,000 pesos. So imagine you're one of these friends, and you have 250,000 pesos. You have 3 other friends. You have a total of 1 million pesos here. And that 1 million peso, you want to make a business. This is the third picture here. So you have a business. Now, the business would go on. You have products, you sell it. And after you sell it, you earn a profit. And your profit now is 200,000. So rule of thumb is, if you have a business, usually it would reach up to 20%, or up and down, or on average, you get 20% of your profit. Now, so you have 200,000 pesos of your profit. So how much do each of you have when you get that profit? So each of you, of course, still owns the 250,000 pesos, plus, because you own 50% here, you have 25%, not 50, but you own 25% of the company, then you also owe 25% of 200,000 pesos. 25% of your profit, which is 200,000 pesos, is 50,000 pesos. Now, each of you will now receive 50,000 pesos plus your original 250,000 pesos. So that's the basics of investment. Now, what if from the original 4, you have an additional 1, and you still have the same investment, 250,000 pesos here, but then from 25%, you only own 20% of the company, because 5 naman mo kabuok. So 20% na lang ang inyong gi-own each. From the original 1 million, now you have 1.25 million pesos in total. You have more money to spend. So you make business, you do the business process again, but then somehow you forget that you should also increase your profit. If you still get the same profit, the same as before nga 4 mo kabuok, you still have 200,000 pesos. When you divide it among the 5 of you, which you only own 25%, 20% na lang, compared to the 25% katong 4 mo kabuok, you only get 40,000 pesos na lang. So you now own your original 250,000 pesos, but only 40,000 pesos from the profit, if you earn the same way as before. So looking at this situation, comparing these two situations, you can now choose the better, what would be the better situation? This or this? And what if you are faced with this situation? What would you do? Would you agree to receive a lower percentage, or what would you do afterwards? And that is what happened during the Asian financial crisis. And let's take a look on what happened in this part. So, during the Asian financial crisis, it started when the Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, and South Korea started to receive foreign direct investment. So there are foreigners trying to invest in each of these countries. And these countries received investments. Because they received a lot of investments, their estate value, their corporate spending, the government projects, and borrowings have a lot, funded heavily by borrowings from bank, but they have a lot of money to spend on. So they spent a lot of money. But then, they forgot that the assets depreciated. Asset prices depreciated. So, remember from the 25%, ni gamay, ni 20%. So, because ni gamay ang ilang share, ni gamay ang ilang asset, a lot of investors also pulled out their investments. So, niundang sila, they don't want nga mugamay ang ilang investment. So, ni gamay na lang. So, ilahang gitang-tang ang ilang investment. And the investments that they pulled out is not a joke, because it's a total of 105 billion investments was pulled out from Asia, and that is a lot of money. 105 billion is, if we multiply that by 50, that should be 5 trillion, around 5 trillion pesos. So that's the amount of money being pulled out by these investors because of what happened. So it led to economic crisis. Economics went down. Nga naman, more money was spent, but the same output is there. So the proper concept should be more money spent, more profit as well, more production, more output, more sales. But it didn't turn out that way. We'll understand why later on. So because of economic decline, unemployment also increased. More people were removed from jobs because the companies cannot afford anymore. If they have to hire, the salary they offer is already very low because, again, they cannot afford anymore. The Southeast Asian currencies were devaluated and foreign exchange reserves were also used up. So, ninaog yun, down ang Asian businesses at that time. So inflation came, inflation of prices came. By inflation, it means the local currency is now cheaper versus the international currency, most likely versus the US dollars. And banks no longer accepted loan applications. Why? Because they could see that these companies no longer can manage themselves. They don't profit well. Why would you let a company borrow money if you can see that they're not doing well? So loans were denied. And the worst thing is that the local businesses were sold to foreign investors at a very low price. So the local businesses that were owned by locals before are now foreign owned and were sold at a very low price. So lower money is coming back to these countries. So what did they do? The solution that they thought of is domestic industrial development. So what is domestic industrial development? This is when in a certain country, there will be production here. Production will come from one company, and then it will be distributed within the country. So production is from the country, and consumption is also from the company. That is what we call tangkilikin ang sariling atin in terms of the Philippines. So it started well for some of the countries. There were some countries that it went well. Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, Africa at that time, they recovered very well in domestic industrialization. But then for other countries, it didn't work very well. Why? Because there are requirements so that you can succeed in domestic industrialization. For example, there should still be financial capital. There should be availability of financial capital. And you should not rely on domestic industrialization itself. You should be involved in both import, meaning getting products from outside of the country and selling it inside the country, and also export, producing inside the country and selling it outside the country. And if you do that, you have domestic industrialization, you have financial capital, you have import and export business. Then you become part of the Asian tigers, including the Philippines at that time, that became aggressively developed, and they went very well. They performed very well in business. But then, for most developing countries, it was a challenge. Because remember, there's one part of the Bretton Woods Agreement that would say, there are members' exchange rate policies. And the foreign investors should not interfere with that process. They should not have unfair competitive advantage. So they should play fair with the local industries. Because remember, these are foreign investors. And if there are foreign investors, of course, they are big companies. But most of these rules from the Bretton Woods Agreement were not followed in most developing countries. Now, remember that the IMF loan conditions, one of the IMF loan conditions is to adopt market-oriented economic models. What does this mean? This means that the nation, the country that is applying for loans from the International Monetary Fund, should open up their economies to foreign competitions. So, it now becomes local business versus international businessmen because you are applying for loans from the IMF. Now, what happens here? Of course, the international investors are very big that the local counterparts, the infant industries from developing countries, will never have any match with foreign firms. So mapildig yun ang mga local companies. Because foreign investors are already big themselves. So the purpose, supposedly, of the IMF is to promote good governance, to eradicate corruption, but then most of the loans that were applied and approved by developing countries were pocketed. They were used for capitalism, meaning the government that were granted loans used it to make their own business. It's not the government actually, but the people in the government. It was pocketed by authoritarian political leaders. And it was used to support the businesses that they serve. So a government servant serving a corporation and using money loaned from the IMF to promote these corporations. Imagine that. So a lot of the World Bank and IMF projects were compromised. It was used for corruption. It was used to support private businesses, if not owned by government servants, supported by government servants. So what did they do? Coming from the Bretton Woods Agreement, which was around 1940s, another agreement was done by the Washington Consensus in the 1970s. So this is the cycle. This is the cycle that happens in global economics. They agree to something, they apply it, and after they apply it, they check what the problems are, and then they revise it again. So I don't need to discuss what's in the Washington Consensus anymore, but you see the concept. They agree, apply, revise. Agree again, apply, and revise. And that's what happens with governments and also businesses. With that, let us proceed to the next step, understanding the transnational corporations. Transnational corporations are very powerful. You would see later on why. And we will compare how powerful they are. First, let's understand what the difference is between international, multinational, global, and transnational companies. When you say international companies, you are a company in a country that imports product from outside and exports product from the country. Then you are considered as an international company. While a multinational company has investments, they are still in the country, but they invest in other businesses at other companies. Now, when you are a global company, you are here in the country, you're doing business in the country, but you're also doing business in other countries. But then again, the decision-making process of your investment present in other countries still comes from your main office, from your main country. If you're a Philippine company doing business outside, the decision-making process is still here in the Philippines being applied in other countries where you are present. And lastly, we have transnational companies. Now, you are invested in the country, you are present in other countries, and your decision-making processes are also being done in different countries. So there are offices, there are decision makers in different countries. Why is this important? Now remember, when you are present in a different country, there's also different needs of consumers, different cultures. That is why you would see, for example, Netflix. They have advertisements that are designed for the Filipino consumers because they are a transnational company. Coca-Cola, they have advertisements designed for the Philippines because they have decision makers in the Philippines. McDonald's, diba? Love ko to. Why? Because they have decision makers here in the Philippines. That makes them a transnational company. And that makes a transnational company very powerful in the international setting. How is this possible? This is possible because of a lot of innovations already present in the international market. Number one, there is already digitalization. So at the tip of your finger, you can already talk to suppliers from outside of the country. You can already talk to distributors from outside the country. So right now, for example, if I want to purchase products, quality products from outside, and then bring it here in the Philippines, and then sell it to local buyers physically and even online. So the power of online, I go to Shopee, Lazada, Facebook, and sell it, then that is digitalization. So I don't need to travel anymore to get products and sell products to different countries. Another innovation is the power of the buyers, the power of the consumers. Right now, the market is widely driven by the consumers. So feedback, review is very powerful. And even though there are a lot of good reviews, one bad review can destroy a store. So for example, in my case, I do e-commerce. Now, at first, I noticed few bad reviews in my store. But then, I somehow forgot that these, for example, 5 to 10 bad reviews might have affected my emotions. But then when I look at the big picture and I check on the good reviews, I still have hundreds of 5-star reviews. So that is the power of reviews. So the consumers control the market right now. And not only the reviews, there's one thing that we recently discovered. in the market setting. So I sell from Cebu, I distribute from Cebu. But if you compare the Cebu province population versus the Luzon population, where most of the money would come from, no matter how we deny it, most of the consumers are there. Being a Cebu warehouse versus a Manila warehouse has a lot of difference. So if you're a Manila warehouse, and then the Manila consumers want their goods delivered very fast, they would choose the Manila warehouse versus the Cebu warehouse, which decreases my chances in the market. So then again, buyer driven. The market is buyer driven. So the consumers have the power. Next, the very best innovation that we have right now is the emergence of financial firms. Before, if you want to go into business, you should have your own money, you should have your own capital. At the very basic, so very basic, no, we know that there are what we call the turco, the Bombays, that they give 5-6. And if you go to carbon market, most of them would rely on these. And that is a very basic financial firm. They let them borrow money. You manage your money. You have to manage it that your profit should be bigger than the interest of what you borrowed. If you borrowed 500 pesos and you are expected to return 600 pesos, you should expect that your business should earn more than 600 pesos. And that would be a viable loan, a viable business design if you do that. And these are present everywhere. So aside from the Turco, we have the home credit, we have bank loans. Home credit right now, if you have very good, if you have good credit, this is what I learned. If you have very good credit line, meaning you are a good payer, you don't need to apply for loans anymore. The banks will call you. The past weeks, Home Credit has been calling me because I have a pre-approved, imagine, a pre-approved loan. I didn't apply for anything, but I have a pre-approved loan, but I didn't grab that because I don't have anything to spend on for that money at the moment. Pero imagine that, if you are a good payer, the credit companies will call you so that you will use their monies. So that is the power, the innovation of business right now, that you don't need to have your own money as long as you have a very good system that you designed. So, let's step back, atras tagamay, and try to compare the big picture. I want to show you something here. On the left side, you would see companies. On the right side, you would see countries. Now, the first 3 digits are in billions. For example, Walmart has an income of 500 billion. State Grid, for example, is an electric company, is 300 billion. Sinopec Group, 300 billion, and so on. So these are international company listed by the Fortune 500 and the World Bank. The World Bank in terms of the country, Fortune 500 in terms of the companies. Top 10 companies. So Walmart is the biggest with 500 billion. Now on the right side, you would see a country. Now, this country also earns. So nasa daini earnings ang country. So this country earns 500 billion. Poland earns 500 billion. China, going second, earns 350 billion. And so on. On the lowest is Vietnam at 213 billion. So why am I showing you this? Left, company. Right, country. These are all earnings from companies and countries. So Poland as a country earns only as much as Walmart, which is a company. Imagine that. And a company can be boiled down into owned by a person, right? A group of people. Versus a country. Pare-pareha ra ang earning nila. So, even Vietnam, pare-pareha ra sa kana nga company. So, Is it not that a country should earn bigger than a company? Country na good na, di ba? Organized by people. Versus a company nga, for at the very least, owned by a person. And then pare-pareha ra ilang income within a year. Di ba? Asa ka ang problema? Ngano man ing ana man siya. Let's look at the local setting in the Philippines. In 2020, the gross national product of the Philippines. Now, gross national product, apil na ang earnings sa mga tao. Gross national income is only the income of the government unta. Pero gross national product ang atong reporting. Pero sige na lang, if we look at that, in the Philippines, we only had 100 billion. Let's go back to the previous slide. Vietnam, lowest in the top 10, 200 billion. Philippines, 100 billion. Half of Vietnam is our earnings, our income in 2020, December 2020. Well, yes, okay, sige, let's take into account COVID. But then again, 100 billion lang. Compared to people. Sige, let's not compare to companies. Let's compare to people. Top 10 richest people in the Philippines, according to Forbes. Top 1 are the C siblings, with a total of $13 billion. So, how rich is the Philippines as a country compared to a person, a group of people? So, the Philippines at 100 billion is only about 10 times richer than the C siblings. Imagine that. Ang C, kung kanapuo na nimo, Pilipinas na. Pilipinas na sila. Diba? So, where does this go wrong? Diba? Now, siguro, I would think, on my own thoughts, siguro, because companies are profit-driven. Diba? They want the company to grow. They want to earn more, to be more. Ana ang company. So, ani siguro dapat ang ato ang mindset for the government ba. If I would say it on my own opinion, the government should think like a company that we should develop agencies that earn money so that we can spend it for the people. Example I could think of is, at the very worst is Russia. Russia makes missiles. Russia makes military weapons and sells it to countries. And that is government owned by the Russian government. So the earnings from those military equipments goes to the government, goes to the people. Qatar, as I would know, has oil. Now, Qatar also owns Qatar Airways. Their ilahang kanang flagship carrier nga plane industry, airport and plane industry. So the earnings from those companies, their oil, the Qatar Airways, goes to the government, goes to the people. So they have these things. What else? So things like this. So the question is, what companies or does the Philippines have these kind of things? Again, maybe I have made mention this in the previous discussion. PAL before was government owned. Shell or Petron, as they would say, before is also government owned. Bataan nuclear power plant should have been government owned. A lot of things should have been government owned but are now privatized. Imagine if we still own those things. The government, imagine if the government still owns those companies, earn money, money goes to the government, and money goes back to the people. So, a government should think like a company so that we can earn like a company and give back to the people. But then again, there is corruption. That is where the problem comes in. With this discussion, you can ponder on your own How do you feel about our present global economic order? Or even at the local setting, how do you feel about it? That has been everything that we have to talk about in this week's video discussion on the global economy, lesson 2 of the contemporary world. We have finished everything on lesson 2, and now you are ready for the midterm exams next week. Thank you very much for listening, and as always, I may not see you on the next video discussion, but you will surely see me on the next video discussion. Goodbye.
Nights just like this. So let's get down to business. Mama, please don't worry about me. 'Cause I'm about to let my heart speak.